Video games long had the image of being made exclusively for kids or nerds. But that is definitely no longer the case. Video game culture has reached the mainstream. In fact, the e-sport industry is growing at an incredibly fast pace and has overtaken most real-life sports in terms of global popularity. It is needless to say that the video games industry is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. The market also belongs to the most competitive ones there are. Video games have evolved ferociously over the last few decades. From linear single-player adventures to massive open worlds to constantly evolving live service games, video games continue to adapt and evolve with time. With so many incredible video games out there, it's hard to compile a list of the 10 greatest games of all time. As such, you should consider this a more subjective list than an objective one. With that said, here are what we believe are the top 10 video games of all time. 10. Bloodborne. With Elden Ring's soaring success both critically and commercially, it's safe to say that From Software games are no longer a niche. Elden Ring is clearly the most ambitious and expansive From Software game to date, and it rightly deserves all the praise that it's getting, though it lacks the enigmatic charm of Bloodborne. Bloodborne isn't perfect, especially when it comes to some of the game's UI design and gameplay aspects. Bloodborne carries over a lot of past From Software games issues such as inconsistent frame rates and long load times. However, where Bloodborne excels, it excels so incredibly well that it's easy to overlook its many flaws. Bloodborne is From Software's most stylish, confident and intimidating offspring that easily overshadows its siblings. Whether it's the distinct gothic art style, hauntingly beautiful score, aggressive and agile combat, the disturbing lore or horrifying enemy designs, Bloodborne is From Software's flawed masterpiece that will remain vivid in the minds of those who experience it for a long time. 9. The Last of Us. The fall of humanity in light of an apocalypse and its struggle to rise and survive makes up for an intriguing backdrop in video games, which is why we get so many post-apocalyptic video games every new console generation. The Last of Us takes place in a similarly pessimistic post-apocalyptic world, but instead of focusing on the redemption of the society, it focuses on the redemption journey of two misfits of characters who are entangled together by sheer coincidence of fate. From jaw-dropping visuals to stellar performances from its cast, from Gustavo Santaolalla heart-wrenching music to intense combat encounters, in The Last of Us, everything comes together organically to create one of the most beautiful, brutal, and heart-wrenching video game experiences that deserve recognition outside of games medium. 8. Resident Evil 4. It's hard to imagine what the AAA survival horror space would look like today if not for the success of Resident Evil 4. In 2005, game director Shinji Mikami and his team at Capcom crafted their magnum opus that smartly weaved the horror and action genre, thus creating a video game that satisfied survival horror fans by almost always keeping them on edge while catering to the action genre fans with sufficient over-the-top bombastic cinematic and gameplay moments. Resident Evil 4 continues to play a pivotal role in influencing modern AAA horror action games. In fact, Capcom's very own Resident Evil Village was built on its DNA and benefited greatly from it. Re-Village also became the fastest-selling Resident Evil game in history. Aside from influencing the future Resident Evil games, Resident Evil 4 has also inspired some of the other iconic survival horror franchises like EA's Dead Space, and Mikami's very own The Evil Within, both of which irrevocably made horror great again. 7. Red Dead Redemption. This game has everything. It is nearly perfect, if not completely. The plot is amazingly structured and the events of the game are constantly changing, so it is almost impossible to get bored. The characters are all very remarkable and unique, and each of them have different perspectives of the world that make the world seem way more real. I distinguish John Marston among the cast. He is not your usual happy-go-lucky protagonist who saves the world and gets the main girl. He's not like that at all. He wasn't always on the side of good, and the player can actually feel the guilt that he faces every morning of his life. He seeks redemption, and puts the well-being of his loved ones before his own life. Truly the best protagonist in a video game to ever exist. The soundtrack is simply beautiful, both ambient music and seasonal songs are masterpieces. 6. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Open-world games really started to flourish during the 8th generation of consoles as the new technologies allowed developers to make bigger and more dynamic worlds. While every open-world game offered something new and ultimately catered to a specific set of audiences, most of them followed a similar design philosophy, thus resulting in a number of open worlds that felt structurally similar. 2017's The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild broke out of that redundant open-world design and offered a world that put players' agency at its forefront. In many ways, Breath of the Wild's design philosophy revitalized the open-world genre and showed both game developers and players the countless possibilities a modern open-world game can have within itself. 5. Fortnite. While the initial reviews weren't overwhelmingly positive, Fortnite has garnered quite a cult following over the last 5 years. In many ways, Fortnite comes close to being an ideal live service game. It features an ever-evolving dynamic game world, giving players new things to experience and new ways to play on a regular basis. It's something that many live service games strive to be, yet very few have managed to achieve and arguably come close to. The multitude of collaborations with the biggest names in pop culture has shaped Fortnite into what could be termed the epitome of pop culture, which, if you stop to think about it, seems like an absolute diligent move from the team at Epic Games, and was undoubtedly shaped by an ingenious and insightful vision. 4. Metal Gear Solid. It's hard to write down a top 10 video game list without mentioning one of Hideo Kojima's artsy, intensely creative, genre-defining blockbuster video games that references iconic movies, music, and overall popular pieces of fiction in all the right ways. While almost all of Kojima's games fit the aforementioned description, one that arguably deserves the most appreciation and recognition is 1998's Metal Gear Solid. This imaginative neo-thriller put a 3D spin on 1987's Metal Gear and introduced gameplay elements that form the core pillars of the stealth genre. Stealth is a viable option in most AAA open-world games nowadays, and it's hard to imagine that being the case without Kojima's contribution to the genre. While plenty of modern AAA games struggles to sync their various gameplay elements with the narrative and story themes and ultimately suffer from something called ludonarrative dissonance, Kojima's games, even to this date, continue to be an exception and strike an inexplicable harmony between the story and gameplay beats. 3. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Skyrim isn't the most innovative Elder Scrolls game, as that credit arguably goes to 2002's Morrowind. However, it's the most ambitious and accessible Elder Scrolls game ever made. Skyrim not just borrows some of the best elements of the past Elder Scrolls games and fine-tunes them to make them more accessible to newcomers, rather, it implements these elements in a very flexible framework that gives players the freedom to play the game they want to play. Player freedom is at the heart of Skyrim, and it is what drives so many people to explore its chilly provinces. Skyrim strives by invoking the spirit of adventuring in a grand and gorgeous world that only a few open-world games have ever managed to. In 2022, Skyrim's open world may not be the biggest in terms of size and content, but its very nature to invigorate the feeling of adventure and its flexible gameplay elements continue to make it one of the best open-world experiences to date. 2. Grand Theft Auto 5. In 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3 completely changed the open-world landscape for the better. In 2008, Grand Theft Auto 4 became one of the most visually detailed and narratively immersive open-world games. It's no doubt that these are two of the best video games ever made, and while they deserve to be on this list, it's 2013's and 2014's and 2015's and 2022's Grand Theft Auto 5 that excels not in just one or two aspects like the other GTA games but in almost every aspect, which makes it the definitive Grand Theft Auto experience. In 2013, Grand Theft Auto 5 became the fastest-selling entertainment product in history, and in 2022, it still continues to sell incredibly well. At this point in time, Grand Theft Auto 5 could very well be referred to as the face of modern video games, and rightly so. And number 1 is Minecraft. The best game ever. On Minecraft you can do basically whatever you want. You can make a house, you can make a building. You can mine for the greatest jewels and craft it with anything. Craft a pickaxe to go mining. Craft a sword to fight off the monsters of the night. You can discover an abandoned mine, find lava or water. Craft an axe to chop up wood and make a house. Make whatever your imagination takes you. You can go on creative to fly and do whatever your imagination takes you. Make a server to go on your friend's world, make a roller coaster or fight each other. If you die, it doesn't matter. You can respawn. Subscribe to Daily Feed for more.